Reports of COVID-19 infection among fully vaccinated people are increasing. Olympic athletes, lawmakers, and heads of state are among the vaccinated who have tested positive for the virus. Such infections are called breakthroughs. They appear to be quite rare and usually cause little, if any, sickness. These breakthroughs are causing fear that the vaccines are not working. But most experts disagree. Dr. Anthony Fauci is the top infectious disease official in the United States.
Jaj, jó lenne, hogy mondjuk egy kicsit balra tartanánk. Ez tényleg puszta jó szándékból mondom. Mert én látom már a térképet, nem akarom még terhelni. Egyébként szerintem össze is zavarnánk önt ezzel. Mert ha most hirtelen azt mondom, hogy balra, akkor ki fogja rántani a kormányt, és megdöblünk mindannyian. Nekem szétgurulnak az alkatrészeim, így ez jobban zavar engem, mint hogy ön megmurdál. Tehát tartsunk egy picit balra. És utána balra.
The main reason most experts consider the vaccines successful is that very few breakthrough cases result in hospital treatment or death.
Érdemes lenne kicsit balra tartani, mert mondjuk hát innen, ahol a műszerfalra vagyok ragasztva, főleg az ön mellét látom, és ez nem nagy élmény, de mindegy. Szóval innen, ahogy azért egy kicsit hátra pillantok, azt látom, hogy ebben a forgalomban önt rohadtul nem fogják beengedni később. Úgyhogy menjünk balra.
Before the body starts fighting the virus. Only about 5,000 out of nearly 160 million vaccinated people
érdemes lenne kicsit balra tartani, mert mondjuk hát innen, ahol a műszerfalra vagyok ragasztva, főleg az ön mellét látom, és ez nem nagy élmény, de mindegy. Szóval innen, ahogy azért egy kicsikét hátra pillantok, azt látom, hogy ebben a forgalomban önt rohadtul nem fogják beengedni később. Úgyhogy menjünk balra.
US health agencies are considering whether vaccinated people should get an extra vaccine treatment called a booster. People worry when they hear news like that which came from British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He was very sick with COVID-19 last year and is fully vaccinated now. However, he went into quarantine this week after being around a person who tested positive.
Én meg ugye álmomban szeretnék meghalni,
but health officials in the US want to be sure people are not overreacting to the breakthrough cases. That is because many people say
tudod, mit csinál az
they do
emberrel
not
egy
want to get the
ütközés egy
shot.
ilyen sebességnél?
The doctors worry those people will think getting the shot is not worth it if some people still get sick. Dr. William Schaffner is an infectious disease expert at Vanderbilt University. He said that is the wrong idea. People need to know the vaccines are doing their job. The vaccines were developed to keep us out of those terrible institutions we call hospitals, he said. We have to keep coming back to that. I'm Dan Friedel.
Mi van? Átfestjük az autót pirosra? Belül? Tarts jobbra, a jobboldali sáv. Egyébként a nők nem szokták tudni, mi az, hogy tarts jobbra. Érdemes a jobboldali sávot váltani. Ez ezt jelenti.
From VOA, learning English, this is the Health and Lifestyle Report. No matter what you choose to grow in the garden, at some point you will have to deal with unwanted plants, known as weeds. Lee Reich is a gardener, and he writes about gardening for the Associated Press. He says a weed is just a plant growing in the wrong place. Even a tomato plant can become a weed if it grows where you don't want it to. Besides being unwanted, What else do
Jobbra kellene
weeds do
tartani.
to a
Jobbra,
garden?
komolyan. Én itt voltam legutóbb, és
Well,
később már
weeds
nagyon nehéz
can
lesz
bring
így
many problems. One problem is this. Weeds steal from nearby plants. They steal nutrients and water. If they grow large enough, weeds can steal, or rather block, sunlight from other plants.
Most van az, hogy majd aztán később fordulunk mindenfelé, meg sávot váltunk, meg ilyesmi. Jobbra kellene tartani.
Harmful bugs and diseases into your garden. For example, a plant called horse nettle is a favorite food for a kind of beetle.
Gratulálok. Én meg ugye álmomban szeretnék meghalni, mint a nagyapám, és nem üvöltesik boltozva, mint az utasai.
So if you are growing potatoes, you do not want horse nettle nearby. Some weeds release chemicals that can slow the growth of nearby plants. A plant called lamb's quarters is guilty of this. The chemicals it releases into the soil may hurt the growth of vegetables such as corn and tomato. It is important to note that some weeds are not all bad.
Értem, hogy van légzsák, de
in fact,
ennyiben.
some are edible. In other words, you can eat them. One edible weed is the one we just mentioned.
Nekem tényleg mindegy, hogy mennyivel mégy, tudod, mert én végül is egy viszonylag strapabírótokban vagyok. De biztos vagy benne, hogy te is?
The website Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners says that the leaves of lamb's quarters contain more iron and protein than raw cabbage or spinach, more calcium and vitamin B1 than raw cabbage, and more vitamin B2 than cabbage or spinach. In the book How to Enjoy Your Weeds, English writer Audrey Wynne Hatfield writes that lamb's quarters was once the most valued vegetable for human beings and their animals.
Mi van? Átfestjük az autót pirosra?
Dandelions are also viewed as a weed by many people. But dandelion leaves are also full of nutrients, and you can eat or use nearly every part of the plant. But even other weeds can do good things in our garden. So before we hurry outside to kill all the weeds, Reich warns us to consider their good side. He says that weeds protect bare soil. The roots of weeds can prevent the soil from being blown away by wind or washed away by rain. Over time, he writes, weeds improve the soil in many ways.
Mindenképpen balra kéne tartani, mert utána ez majd később szerephez fog jutni ebben a melodrámában, ami a Marci vezet című címre hallgat. Ön a Marci, teljesen mindegy egyébként ilyen szempontból, hogy ön nő vagy férfi, ezt végül is nem tudom felmérni, egész életemben így volt. Lassan meg már mindegy, és az ember söréttel lő, előbb-utóbb majd csak megtisztul valaki.
However, left to grow on their own, weeds can take over a garden.
Én értem, hogy van légzsák,
Many
de
plants are
ennyiben.
considered weeds because they grow quickly and easily in bad conditions.
Én nem vagyok benne biztos, hogy ilyen rohadt gyorsan kéne menni.
Add a layer of weed-free organic material to the top of your garden, around the plants. This material, called mulch, improves the soil and keeps weeds from growing. Reich says wood chips, sawdust, grass clippings, straw, and pine needles are good for mulches. A simple and effective method of weed control is to break up the surface layer of the soil. But you must do this regularly. However, Reich gives this warning. Do not turn the soil over, ever. Buried in the soil are weed seeds, waiting for the right conditions. If you turn the soil over, you give those seeds the light and air they need to grow. Reich says to avoid using other man-made materials that may harm the environment, such as landscape fabrics or black plastic. Over time, landscape fabrics become mixed with soil and roots. This makes it difficult to reshape a garden. Black plastic eventually finds its way into the trash, and neither is good at controlling weeds. And, Reich says, they are both ugly. Herbicides are chemicals that kill plants. Reich says they should be a last resort, or the last thing you try, because everything else has failed. These chemicals may harm garden plants or other parts of the environment. They often hurt pollinators, like bees and butterflies. Probably the best way to fight some weeds is to eat them. Just make sure they are, in fact, edible. And that's the Health and Lifestyle Report. I'm Anna Matteo.
Jobbra kellene tartani, jó, mert aztán jönnek a nyilak, amelyeket felfestenek a betonra, és csak csodálkozik.
We tell about the European settlers who established colonies in the American Northeast in the 1600s. Here is Steve Ember.
Majd hát ki kéne hajtani a jobb oldalon, pusztán csak azért, hogy jó irányba menjünk.
The Puritans were one of the largest groups from England to settle in the area known as Massachusetts. They began arriving in 1630. The Puritans had formed the Massachusetts Bay Company in England. The king had given the company an area of land between the Charles and Merrimack rivers. The Puritans were Protestant Christians who had split from the Anglican Church. They wanted to change the church to make it more holy, more pure in their eyes. The Puritans were able to live as they wanted in Massachusetts. Soon, they became that area's largest religious group. By 1690, 50,000 people were living in Massachusetts. Puritans thought their faith was the only true religion and that everyone should believe in it. They also believed that church leaders should lead the local government and that all people in the colony should pay to support the Puritan Church. The Puritans thought it was the job of government leaders to tell people what to believe. But some people disagreed with the Puritans, who became leaders of the colony. One of those who disagreed was a Puritan minister named Roger Williams. Roger Williams believed, as all Puritans did, that other European religions were wrong. He thought the spiritual traditions of the Native Americans were wrong too. But he did not believe in trying to force others to agree with him. He thought that it was a sin to punish or kill anyone in the name of Christianity. And he thought that only members of the church should have to pay to support the church. Roger Williams began speaking and writing about his ideas. He wrote a book arguing that it was wrong to punish people for having different beliefs. Then he declared that the European settlers were stealing land that belonged to the Indians. He said the King of England had no right to let people settle on land that was not his.
Mi van? Átfestjük az autót pirosra? Belül?
The Puritan leaders of the Massachusetts Bay Colony forced Roger Williams to leave the colony in 1636. He traveled south. He bought land from local Indians and started a city, Providence. The English Parliament gave him permission to establish a new colony, Rhode Island, with Providence as its capital. As a colony, Rhode Island accepted people of all religious beliefs, including Catholics, Quakers, Jews, and even people who did not believe in God. Roger Williams also believed that governments should have no connection to a church. This idea of separating church and state was new. Later, it would become one of the most important of all the governing principles of American democracy.
Gratulálok. Én meg ugye álmomban szeretnék meghalni, mint a nagyapám, és nem üvöltve sikoltozva.
Other colonies were started by people who left Massachusetts to seek land.
Én nem vagyok benne biztos, hogy ilyen rohadt gyorsan kéne menni.
One of those colonies was Connecticut. A group led by a Puritan minister named Thomas Hooker left Boston in 1636. They moved inland and settled near the Connecticut River. Others soon joined them. Other groups from Massachusetts traveled north to find new homes. The King of England had given two friends a large piece of land in the north. The friends divided it. John Mason took what became the colony of New Hampshire.
Tudod, mit csinál az emberrel egy ütközés egy ilyen
the area
sebességnél?
that later became the state of Maine. Maine was never a colony. It remained a part of Massachusetts until the United States was established in 1776.
Nem akarom még terhelni. Egyébként szerintem össze is zavarnánk önt ezzel, mert ha most hirtelen azt mondom, hogy balra, akkor ki fogja rántani a kormányt, és megdöbünk mindannyian. Nekem szétgurulnak az alkatrészeim, így ez jobban zavar engem, mint hogy ön meghúzza. Tehát tartsunk egy picit balra.
They called it New Netherland. Their home country, the Netherlands, was a great power, with colonies all over the world. A business called the Dutch West India Company owned most of the colonies. The Dutch claimed American land because of explorations by Henry Hudson, an Englishman working for the Netherlands. The land the Dutch claimed was between the areas settled by the Puritans in the north and the Anglican tobacco farmers in the south. The Dutch were not interested in settling the territory. Instead, they wanted to earn money. The Dutch West India Company built trading posts on the rivers claimed by the Netherlands. Indians brought animal skins to these posts for use in making goods for buyers back in Europe. In 1626, the Dutch West India Company bought two islands from the local Indians. The islands were Manhattan and Long Island. The Dutch paid for Manhattan with goods worth only about $24. The Dutch West India Company tried to find people to settle in America, but few Dutch wanted to leave Europe. So the colony welcomed people from other colonies and other countries. These people built a town on Manhattan Island. They called it New Amsterdam. It was soon full of people who had arrived on ships from faraway places. Up until this time, the population was mostly Dutch and British. But now one could hear as many as 18 different languages spoken in New Amsterdam. In 1655, the governor of New Netherland took control of a nearby Swedish colony on Delaware Bay. 9 years later, the English did the same to the Dutch. The English seized control of New Amsterdam and renamed it New York. That ended Dutch control of the territory that is now the states of New York, New Jersey, and Delaware. Most of the Dutch in New Amsterdam did not leave after it became New York. The English allowed everyone to stay. They let the Dutch have religious freedom. The Dutch were just not in control anymore. The Duke of York owned the area now. He was the brother of King Charles II of England. The king gave some of the land near New York to two of his friends. Sir George Carteret and Lord John Berkeley established a colony. They called it New Jersey, after the English island where Carteret was born. The two men wrote a plan of government for their colony. It created an assembly that represented the settlers. It provided for freedom of religion. Men could vote in New Jersey, whatever their religion. Soon, people from all parts of Europe were living in New Jersey. Then King Charles took control of the area. He sent a royal governor to rule, but the colonists were still allowed to make their own laws through their elected assembly. The King of England did the same in each colony he controlled. He collected taxes from the people who lived there, but allowed them to govern themselves. One religious group that was not welcome in England was the Quakers. Quakers call themselves Friends. They believe that everyone has an inner light that leads them to God. Quakers believe they do not need a religious leader to tell them what is right, so they had no clergy. Quakers believe that all people are equal. The Quakers in England refused to recognize the king as more